An innocent child stood staring at the vast blue skies above, but staring back at him was a huge disaster. Countless arrays of blades hovered above the unfortunate crowd of humans, waiting to pour down. This awaiting brutality was nothing short of a divine punishment. The bloody mayhem that had quite literally spiked on this day made the humans believe that God is a woman, that God is a devil. The wheel of time turned its usual route, and after a decade passed, the boy became invincible, because he became a cameraman, and we all know that this mother chucker never dies. Now he was filming an individual named Yu-Il Lam, accompanied by a rather nervous girl, who in my stead was also requesting the crowd to like, share, and subscribe. You might rightfully ask, why was she nervous? But after monsters had laid waste to the world, it also created an opportunity for people to harness that exact same depressing circumstance to gather their fair share of riches and fame. In simpler words, Yu-Il Lam was a monster streamer. Naturally, countless people had lost their families to the monsters, but the normal citizens, who lacked the superhuman powers and talent required to fight the responsible monsters, gained a secondary satisfaction by watching these monster streamers kill monsters in their stead. Talk about a laziness that is reasonable to even Steven's parents. However, the market was soon saturated, and most of these monster streamers, or MS like Yu-Il Lam, failed to make it big. The solution such a musclehead found was a hot dancer to grow his audience. Yep, this guy was doing anything to regain his lost viewership, and needless to say, this was also the reason behind her nervousness. The target of their hunt today is a sleeping monster named Simeon. For the satisfaction of his viewers, he was aiming to hunt the one-star monster, and although a menial rank, he created the catch of hunting it all alone. In the entirety of their country of Korea, only 86 individuals were capable of such a feat, and Yu-Il Lam was aiming to become the 87th. Our not yet invincible protagonist, Choi Gang-shik, is dumbfounded by the sudden disclosure and tries to convince the musclehead that the hunt was a stretch. In the lack of hunters to either protect them or to act as the actual firepower required to subdue the beast, their situation was already bad, but was yet to worsen, because Yu-Il Lam was also far from sober. Unfortunately, he was but just a cameraman who had to silence himself at the hunter's glare. After a final vote of confidence from the Daeum hot dancer, the hunter gleamed, concentrating an even hotter talent in the center of his palm. Ever since the destruction of humanity had started, people awakened something, and this was later termed as superpowers. Just a few select individuals who possessed the likes of talents were the ones capable of utilizing them, and our unfortunate protagonist Choi Gang-shik evidently lacked any. In this harsh reality, he, an average human, would face certain death against even the puny monstrosities. Yu-Il Lam uses his blazing hands to direct the fiery talent, and the monster, much like you and me, was enjoying the only embrace it could, the embrace of sleep. It was enveloped in a torrent of flames, and while the one responsible grinned at his success, the cameraman was still and silent, as if conveying uncertainty. The joyous pair returned, ready for the long-awaited hot dance, but there arose the Simeon, with a face resembling mine when my sleep is disturbed, and reasonably furious, it leaped over the walls of flames. Il Lam somehow evades the fatal blow alongside the dancer, and Gang-shik repents the hunter's decision to have not attacked its vitals like the eyes or joints instead. The hotness around compelled the streamer to flee, while his main attraction was slapped away like a rag doll and lost all its hotness. He was desperate to escape the predicament popularly known as death, and such, he urged Gang-shik to draw the attention of the monster. The viewers certainly found their long-awaited entertainment that day, because the monster leaped, aiming for the cameraman in Chapter 2. Gang-shik, God is constantly watching over you, went his father back when he was a child. But the unfortunate reality now argued otherwise. Amidst his desperate attempt at escaping, he falls to the ground, wishing he could speak to his father and convey his certainty that there was no God to be found in this cruel world of his. But at that very moment, a blue light flickers before him, and a screen materializes, displaying the single viewer count. His body somehow forces itself away from the following disastrous blow, and his mind failed to fathom it all. What the hell was that just now? What was that message? He is puzzled as the mysterious window further announces the confusion of an entity named God. But he doesn't have any fancy time to think, because another punch forces him to duck. Having found his haven behind a tree, he is intent on dodging all of the simian's blows at all possible costs, because as mentioned previously, a single blow is a certain death for the powerless likes of him. The certain God commendably grew busy preparing corn, and as he pressed his back against the tree, he felt an odd sensation from within the bag. Inside it were a few dynamites, accompanied by a shovel. Yep, you heard me right. It was a shovel. He called out to the monkey and aimed for its arm with a pack of dynamite wrapped around a makeshift shaft. With a successful feint to draw his attention, this Cedric Diggory swooped from above and went straight in for the final decisive blow, resolute to never lose against the likes of a monkey. Unfortunately, he barely bruised his ancestor, because just as the author quoted, "Real life isn't a manhwa." Our ancestors were considerably intelligent, because to cooperate with the shovel, the simian heaved a huge pile of dirt. Despite Gangshik's urges, the simian wasn't intent on settling it with mere words. It was ever since talents had awakened their superpowers that in his super powerless past, Gangshik had worked his body the hardest for the simple motive of survival. As for his mind, he devoured research books on monsters and their corresponding anti-monster strategies. Now, he took off running as the overwatching god turned into a cheerleader, and in the absence of either abilities or time, Gangshik halts to turn and decides to face the monster head-on. In a blurry instant, he darted away to evade the charging monster, far exceeding his capabilities. He used all of his knowledge and best of his IQ to calculate it all and hurl the rear end of the shovel at the monster's arse. Kakashi and Naruto must be proud of you, son. The simian let out a terrifying screech of understandable agony because the shaft in Gangshik's hands was now laden with monstrous blood. Furious, it turned to pummel the mannerless cameraman with brute force, but exploiting the exposed torso and momentum before him, Gangshik managed to pierce the simian's hide, and the bloody tip of the shovel emerged from its back. Gangshik panted heavily, trying to catch his breath. Despite his overwhelming exhaustion, he felt a sudden power flooding him, but simultaneously, he also found the strange screen announcing the satisfaction of the onlooking god. The baffling event forces him back up, because that certain god called his friends over, and the viewer count rises to 3. His fallen camera had been streaming the entire feat to the human audience as well, who were stunned at the unbelievable scene. The feat of a civilian defeating a monster was unprecedented, and they could only wonder from across their screens. Is this Hunter for real? When he grabbed his camera, he was astounded at the surging replies of disbelief and turned to find himself staring at the numb body of the simian. Furthermore, the concurrent view counts had exceeded a massive 8,000, which I hope would some fortunate day happen with my channel as well. And with the strange window still flickering above his head, he could only conclude that it was all a dream. With the number of godly viewers having increased to 3, he debated if it was the reason for his sudden growth as well. Disregarding it, he decides to address one problem at a time, the foremost being the 8,000 viewers. Through them, he learned that a rescue squad was arriving at the scene, while the deserter Yu Il Lam had been arrested as soon as he had made it into the city after being reported by the viewers. At the viewers' flooding messages of concern about the no longer hot dancer, he turns to find the girl lying limp across the field after being smacked by the beast previously. Indifferent from the human audience, the gods were urging him to hurry to check on her. He approaches slowly, well aware that he could not show the girl's corpse on camera. Strangely enough, the Holy Trinity was growing curious, and noticing the approaching rescue squad, Shik-Shak decides to leave the girl up to the experts. Medics rush out of the vans and towards the victims, and unable to explain his unfathomable situation himself, Gangshik claims his success to have been founded by sheer luck. They requested him to film them from a distance, because alongside them, he too had an essential down below. As they nudge the simian, it starts to growl, announcing that it is still alive and kicking. Choi Gang-shik starts to relay these updates to the viewers in a vague attempt to explain the situation because there exists a special material inside the monster corpses, an unknown material that condenses the life and strength of the monster, popularly known as the monster's core. Ah! A scream grabs the attention of Gang-shik, and as he traced his eyes to find a fallen medic, one of the gods cackled. A terrible mucus oozes out of the hot dancer, and disregarding the dirty thoughts of your mind, a proportionately heinous monster formulated from the fluids. This being was an undertox, whose wrath unfurls in the 3rd chapter. This was a lethal 1-star monster as well, that observes control over toxins and poisons, but that wasn't all. This slimy substance that emerged out of the girl, which sounds rather bad, but this, entity was an extremely sly and fierce one that hid under an injured person and poisoned whoever approached to help. Disregarding their panic and nervousness, the medics decide to resort to the manual tactics and techniques, as did our protagonist cameraman, Choi Gang-shik. From the rugged rucksack, he finds a handy blowtorch, which he uses to spark a torrent of flames to corner the undertox. It was a natural weakness of the slime, but the flames weren't powerful enough. Foremost, he needs to rescue the victims, because logically, the monster was a parasite, and killing its prey and host was the last thing it would do. He grabs a fire extinguisher and perches his rightful keepsake on his shoulders before rushing in to neutralize the toxins. This guy didn't give a single fuck about heroism or human life. His only goal now was to use everything to firmly establish himself as an MS. As a cameraman, he stood no chances at even facing the monster that had killed his parents. And despite his countless years of service, no one would acknowledge him, much less grant him a chance to grow. His instincts were now screaming that this was the opportunity he had been seeking all along. Now or never it was, because he directed the fire extinguisher using the quote-unquote wisdom of the weak. He starts engaging with the audience and explains that the fire was a fatal weakness for undertox. So, while that would neutralize the poisons, he would rescue the people while saving himself using the extinguisher. When cornered, the monster would either abandon its prey or extract all the energy of the host for a final struggle. It picked the latter and forced itself into the girl's body to control her, but Gang-shik did not even hesitate to thrash her with the extinguisher, because as I said earlier, he did not give a single fuck. The gods berate him for being a little too harsh, and ignoring their bickering, he rescued one victim after another on his shoulders. The fire was growing harsh on him as well, necessitating his need to escape quickly, but the persistent parasite was still within the dancer, and now stood intercepting him. In a flash, she lets out an eerie hiss, and the undertox pulls itself out of her mouth and away to safety. Would you bet that left a poisonous aftertaste in her mouth? Fortunately, its decision of escaping helped hasten the rescue, and as the icing on the cake, Gang-shik's view count had rose tremendously. He asked the fans of Yu Il-lam to wait for his television debut on the news flash and bid them all a hearty farewell. This was just the mere start of his sweet revenge. Soon his godly view count rose to 4, and he overtook Yu Il-lam's channel as a new monster streamer but also a cameraman. This, my friends, was just the beginning, for both him and obviously me. At a further note, subscribe to the channel and like the video if you would like me to create a follow-up on this one.